For Global Business Update, Michael Wilson joins us now from London. Good morning, Michael.
Good morning. Good morning. Let's first of all talk about Asia-Pacific regions, as we always do. And the region there, basically a bit of a dampener. There's no progress yet. That's the important word, yet, on the US debt ceiling talks, and that's tending to cast a long shadow over the market. In particular, though, New Zealand has raised its main interest rate to 5.5%, and also Hong Kong is down quite a lot this morning. They're down about 1% on manufacturing and also on healthcare as well, not doing very well in Hong Kong. China has a new ambassador, just arrived in New York. His name is Xi Feng. We'll be hearing a lot about him. What he's saying is that any decoupling from the US and China, between the two of them, is very, very dangerous for the world economies. I think we sort of know that. The bilateral relationship between them faces difficulties and challenges, serious difficulties and challenges, he's saying. I think we know all this, but it's quite important that a new ambassador is in place there. There's been a gap for 6 months. The previous one went on to be China's foreign minister. Alibaba, China's e-commerce giant, is gearing up for the IPO of its cloud computing division. Now, this is where it sees the future going. We did talk about this last week and how a couple of years ago it split itself into 6 units. The IPO was sort of announced. It's gearing itself up for a complete spin-off. The whole process will probably take about 12 months, but nevertheless, it's in progress as we speak. The NVIDIA chief executive, Jensen Huang, in the United States, has been saying, look, the problem with decoupling from China is it could cause enormous damage to the US tech industry, and it's still an escalating row, no question about that. And of course, the problem is that China will source its own semiconductors, which will hurt NVIDIA business, which is actually based in California. So, as far as the United States is concerned, then the Republicans are questioning, as I said they would. They're looking for their price of the deal, and they're looking at energy permits. They're looking at work requirements for state aid. In other words, really prove that you can't work, otherwise you don't get state aid. And the redistribution of COVID emergency aid funds as well. Where will those go? They say they're getting closer to a deal, but haven't seen it so far. Netflix is going around the United States and saying to people, look, the days of free subscriptions are now over. Yes, you can have it in your household. You can have another subscription in your household. But if it's outside that, then the outside person has to pay $7.99 a month. They said they do this on Apple is investing in Broadcom. Part of it's what they say is £430 billion investment in the US economy. They're doing that to safeguard their chip supply chains. And again, it's part of that much bigger deal, they say, to protect the economy of the United States, or at least put money into it. WhatsApp. Now, WhatsApp is allowing you to edit 15 minutes after you've sent your message. So in other words, if you've said something you don't like or think you don't like, you can actually edit your email for 15 minutes. It's very much on the line of what its rivals its rivals it's got well, Telegram is one of them, clearly. It's got some rivals there, and these things will show up as edits, but at the same time they won't show up. They won't say which bits are in fact edited. Virgin Orbit has crash landed. It's no longer after bankruptcy. It sold a lot of its assets to a neighbouring organisation, but this is something that Richard Branson spun out of the Virgin Galactic empire, and now it is no longer no longer working. The EU is defending. The EU now it's defending plans to continue with the euro-denominated clearing houses. Now, again, this is very, very technical, but what's actually being said is that they will continue with the seizing of their kind of business, and it doesn't matter what the other clearing houses say. The EU is going to be carrying on with that, and the person behind this is Mary McGuinness, not him, but Mary McGuinness, who is actually the Financial Services Commissioner. You're looking at the Chief Executive of Siemens, Roland Bush, who's saying that they will continue to expand in China. They like the Chinese as customers because the Chinese actually ask for big tech solutions, which Siemens actually quite likes. To the UK then, almost finally, and we've had the inflation figures, 8.7% for April. And the Bank of England was in front of the Financial Services Committee in the House of Commons yesterday, Andrew Bailey admitting that the bank had made mistakes. I think they certainly have. And as far as forecast, nobody should take credit for inflation falling. Remember, all this is doing is comparing what prices were in April April last year, rather, when energy prices were quite high. When it will fall to a target, well, that's further out, long into 2024, I suspect. Oil, we're getting to commodities now, is trading really. I mean, it's mulling what's happening on the US debt discussions and so on. Will the Saudis, this is the question they're asking now, will the Saudis continue to live with an oil price which is approaching $70 a barrel? Suspect not. Will there be production cuts? There may well be. And as far as gold is concerned, again, awaiting on the debt deal, awaiting what's going to happen in the United States. But it is pushing towards its record target of well over $2,000 an ounce, but not yet. Same as the debt discussions. That's the global view.
Well, Michael, I have so much to talk about. First, let me just start very quickly with the Shell annual general meeting, with some shareholders disrupting the meeting and having to be forcefully carried out, and asking the board of directors to go to hell. The only hell I know is one city in somewhere out there in Europe. So should they really go to hell? Because the main issue here is climate resolution 26, and the humongous profits are being made by Shell. But you have some other shareholders saying, no, these profits should be kept for us, not for any climate change issues. Isn't there a case of hypocrisy here? And the second one, the IMF has commended the UK for doing well, and is now projecting that in 2023, we expect a growth of 0.4%, rather than the 0.3% that the IMF talked about previously. But, Georgieva is also advising the UK not to do anything about taxes, not to reduce taxation. What do you think of this? Although you mentioned Andrew Bailey complaining about what they've been doing about outlook and forecasting. Just those two issues.
Okay, Shell, first of all, you should note actually that 80% of the people actually at that meeting did not agree with the protesters, and also Shell did not get much support, I suspect, or much antipathy from those protesters when the oil price was below zero. In other words, it was costing people to store it, and that wasn't that long ago. Only 2 or 3 years ago. The fact of the matter is that all these, they have made record profits. Yes, they have. The optics, which PR people talk about of the oil companies, is not very good. The fact of the matter is that shareholders stick with oil companies through thick and thin, and they like the fact that they provide big dividends. Now, if the shareholders think that, then the shareholders will continue to invest. And whilst the protesters, no doubt, had a very noisy protest, the silent majority of shareholders actually quite didn't necessarily support, but didn't actually react as strongly as the protesters did to Shell's move towards their transition towards fossil-free fuels, which I think is going to take a long, long time, much longer than 2030. But, I could be proved wrong as far as that's concerned. So the protesters were noisy, but they were very much a minority. As far as the IMF's concerned, look, if I were a businessman or a woman, I would not be depending on the IMF to bring out any forecasts, nor would I be depending on the Bank of England. Both have made huge mistakes in the past. Bank of England particularly, how does an organisation like that, with agents throughout the UK, get inflation so wrong for so long? And what is the IMF? Why is the IMF suddenly changing its mind about the UK economy? Not by much, but it is changing its mind. And note, we will not be at the bottom of the G7. That space is now for Germany, which has, according to the IMF, net zero growth. I could paper my study here with IMF forecasts which are wrong, let them long continue, disregard what the IMF says.
All right. Well, with the IMF, we also got reports this morning about the inflation rate coming down from 10.1% to a little over 8%, the lowest in a very long time. However, what has been said is that it wouldn't still affect prices of food, especially in terms of food inflation and other costs. What it just means is that prices will rise at a slower rate. So the UK is still not yet out of the woods in terms of inflation. And like you've mentioned, the governor, Andrew Bailey, has admitted that they made some mistakes. I'd like you to expand, though. What kind of mistakes do you think, to share with us some of the learnings or perhaps the mistakes he made? Because we have talked about it a number of times on this show, raising the basis points, how effective it has been, and, where to go from there. And then second of all, just very quickly, because I have a short time, is this deal, Apple and Broadcom, the fact that they'll be producing in Colorado and other states in the United States. The concern earlier on raised on this show before was the cost of production. How would this be managed and not raise prices for Apple?
I think you're absolutely right about Apple. I'm sure it will rise prices, but that's part of the cost of not depending upon China for semiconductor parts, which of course that's the reason that they say they're doing it. They are, after all, protecting their bottom line, which is certainly about supply. As far as prices are concerned, I'm certain that it will put prices up. What isn't tested so far is whether or not faithful Apple customers, will pay more for additional stuff. And also, of course, Apple is expanding very, very heavily into India. So it may be that the volume of what they sell keeps prices down. I don't know. I'm not on Apple's financial board, but those are my kind of guesses about it. As far as the IMF, the Bank of England, and all the rest of it's concerned, I think I've already answered that question, but I'll run through it again. I do feel the Bank of England, I cannot believe that they got so much so wrong, because they're supposed to be connected with the UK economy. I think that they will continue to raise interest rates. The IMF is certainly saying that it will probably raise interest rates, but the Bank of England got its inflation forecast very, very wrong. It also kept going with free money. The technical phrase, which we know, we talked about earlier, often on this program, is quantitative easing. That caused inflation. Of course, that caused inflation. How could it not cause inflation? So all these things seem to me that the experts have got it wrong time after time after time. As far as I'm concerned, the experts have got it wrong for too long. And you're absolutely correct to note that the fall in inflation is only a fall in the rate of price rises. Thus, if you compare it with the energy prices in 2022, which are relatively high, and compare it with prices nowadays, which are relatively low, it looks like inflation has fallen. It has, as far as the index is concerned. The cost of living has not fallen, and food inflation currently stands, as I understand it, at 19% in this country. So the cost of living still continues. But as far as the experts are concerned, trust the person in the street.
Well, Michael, what I take away from Andrew Bailey's statement is not just his complaint about forecasting model, getting it wrong. It's also about what he calls groupthink. Everybody thinking in the same direction in fighting inflation. And I referred to hell earlier on. There's a town called Hell in Michigan. There's another town called Hell in Norway. Maybe for the benefit of those who don't know that there is hell here on earth. Thank you very much, Michael Wilson.